Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the next half hour, we'll make a speed run through all the key business news stories you need to know about from across the African continent. From Cairo, Lagos, Johannesburg and Nairobi, we've got you covered. Here's what's coming up. As its half-year profits rise by over 30%, we'll be talking to Safaricom CEO Bob Collymore about the business environment in Kenya. Rwandans are turning to cheaper flexi biogas for cooking fuel and manure. And we'll be featuring an Egyptian family's tradition that is winning one barber, lots of loyal donkeys and their owners too. Now, before we get on to the business of taking your donkey over to the barber, let's start in Tanzania. Top officials at the state-owned Tanzania Petroleum Development Corporation have been arrested on charges, apparently, of failing to release to Parliament oil and gas contracts which the government signed with foreign and local investors. Tanzania's Parliamentary Committee on Public Accounts had police arrest James Andelile, the acting Director General of the State Oil Agency, and its board chairman Michael Mwanda for refusing to comply with its November 3rd deadline for releasing 26 oil and gas contracts to the Parliamentary Oversight Panel. Now, the Petroleum Development Corporation has resisted requests so far to disclose the production sharing agreements on the grounds that it was bound by confidentiality clauses. And that has raised suspicion among Tanzanians over who exactly benefits from these contracts. Local media reports indicate that the Petroleum Development Corporation had asked for more time in order to get those contracts out. On the other side of the continent, the failed South African micro-lender African Bank Investments, or ABIL as it's more commonly known, has been forced to delay the publication of its annual results as it tries to sort out what it describes as audit complexities. Now, these problems relate to the rescue of two of its units, Ellerine Furnishers Proprietary Limited and Ellerine Holdings Limited. ABIL said the placement of both of these units under business rescue had, quote, resulted in these entities being deconsolidated. Or in non-technical terms, they were simply split from the group. Now, the lender collapsed in August under a mounting load of bad debts, leading the South African Reserve Bank to step in with a $1.5 billion rescue plan. ABIL is under investigations for fraud, reckless lending, questionable management practices as well. No new date has been given for when it will publish its annual numbers. Still in South Africa, the country's revenue services have released their annual tax collection statistics bulletin over in Pretoria with very little surprises, if any at all. As Angelo Coppola reports, the country got some 80.7% of its revenue from just three sources, totaling over $70 billion.
A total of $72.8 billion was collected in the form of personal income tax, corporate tax and value-added tax. The remainder came from the other taxes section, which includes the fuel levy.
Key message that will come out of this is that the impact on policy decision making extends beyond fiscal affairs. It extends into the socio-economic environment, because as from a tax base we are able to track groups and cohorts of taxpayers. So we could, for instance, look at youth unemployment, we could look at the extent to which pensions return back to the market, and all of those nuances which you normally cannot get from a survey.
SARS is starting to collect a lot more information and therefore is able to target taxes a lot more effectively.
And it's because of these new approaches and the government's developmental focus that another social divide is being reduced.
Well, because of fiscal policy in South Africa, we see that some 3.6 million people are lifted out of poverty. It raises their incomes above $2.50 a day. We also see that fiscal policy is narrowing the gap in incomes between the rich and the poor, and resulting in a sizable reduction in the Gini coefficient of inequality, almost by a quarter.
There were a little over 15 million registered taxpayers last year, and only 7 million of those paid any personal income tax. This is the single largest source of tax collected by the government, at $31 billion, or 34.5% of the tax total. And it points to a relatively healthy employment sector.
People in jobs have done very, very well in formal sector jobs in South Africa, with an increase of nearly 12% on average for each of the last 10 years. Is a phenomenal achievement and is way above the inflation rate.
The news wasn't all good when it came to the collection of corporate income tax. While it was the third largest contributor to total revenues, at around $17.9 billion or 19.8% of the pie, There were some issues there that date back to 2008.
The one big takeaway is that the Great Recession of 2008-2009 is still having an impact on our corporate tax collection, as assessed losses are still very big and many companies are going to write that off.
The SARS data points to something that we all know already. A very small proportion of the population are paying the largest amounts of tax. There's no question that it's benefiting those below the poverty line. However, the country still has a major deficit that it needs to fund, and we're not sure where that money is going to come from. I'm Angelo Coppola for CCTV in Johannesburg.
Let's move on to East Africa now. Safaricom has posted a 32.7% jump in pre-tax profits to over $230 million for the 6-month period ending September 30th. Now, these half-year numbers were attributed in part to growing revenues in voice, data, messaging and, of course, mobile money. Safaricom is 40% owned by Britain's Vodafone. Its earnings before interest, taxation, depreciation and so on was up 16.2% to $373.9 million. The telecom operator, of course, is facing increased competition for M-Pesa, its mobile money transfer service, as Equity Bank, that's Kenya's biggest lender, at least by deposit account, starts to roll out a competing service. Now, Safaricom does handle M-Pesa transactions worth about $1 billion every single month. Let's get some more details on those numbers. Bob Collymore, Safaricom CEO, is with us in studio right now. Very interesting numbers coming from your team today.
Thank you.
Let's start with the broader picture, though, because over the last 12 months, the story of Safaricom has been dotted by one where various arms of government have had a fairly adversarial relationship with the company. Legislators, of course, politicizing, to use your words, the handling of the security contract, the competition authority, essentially saying you need to open up your mobile money agent network as well. Do you feel that now that you're the only profitable mobile service provider, that sometimes you've got to walk around eggshells when dealing with government?
Well, I think when you're when you're in the position we're in, then yes, you do have to walk around eggshells. But there's a danger of thinking of government as being a single entity. Government is a very large customer of ours. They are a shareholder. They are a tax collector. They are a regulator. So you deal with different arms in different ways. But I think by and large we've got a pretty good relationship with them.
All right. Moving on, however, to M-Pesa. This, of course, is the one thing everyone thinks about when they talk about M-Pesa, rather Safaricom. It's now evolving beyond just a point-to-point money transfer tool. As you get more and more smartphones on the network, how will M-Pesa evolve?
Well, I think people tend to fixate on M-Pesa, but actually if you look at our growth, you will see that we had tremendous growth from data. So data grew by 53%. M-Pesa grew by 24%, which is, is decent. So we're not a one-trick pony in that sense. But yes, you're right. I think we're seeing technology evolve, and certainly cards are going to start to play a bigger role. I think smartphones, Android smartphones, applications coming on those phones which allow payment, and we will be exploring and exploiting all of those.
So more NFC, more card options, more point-of-sale systems like Lip and M-Pesa, for example.
Yes, Lip and M-Pesa currently has about 32,000 merchants accepting it, but it's still a little bit clunky. And I think there are some people who want to use mobile phone and some people who want to use tap and pay, or NFC, I think this is regularly called. And indeed, you'll get peer-to-peer, so you can tap your phone to another phone and transfer money that way. So there are lots of exciting developments and innovation in that space.
Let's focus on those Lip and M-Pesa numbers, because I remember when you released results in, I believe it was May, you mentioned that 20% of the registered merchants were active then. Has that figure changed between May and September? Yeah,
what we said was 20,000 were active. Now there are 32,000 that are active. But interestingly, the ones who are active have grown the size of the transactions that they're doing. So if you take a combination of Lip and M-Pesa, which is person to retail, and then you take the FMCG or cashless distribution, and by that we mean people like East Africa Brewery who are distributing there and collecting money by M-Pesa. And then you take Paybill. If you put all of those things together, it accounts for more than 50% of the cashless transactions in the country.
So there's plenty of headroom for this to grow even further.
Often, so certainly today, a lot of people have been talking about competition, and we say, well, our competition really is cash, because 94% of transactions are currently cash. And that's where we're aiming at, and I guess that's where most of our competitors are aiming at. I think people need to stop seeing this as being two competitors fighting over a small pie. The pie is actually a very large pie, and I think there's plenty of room for us and for our competitors.
All right, moving on, however, to the question of data. That, of course, is the one thing that you sounded quite excited about with regard to growth. And you mentioned something to the effect that the number of handsets that you have on your network now, 3G devices, is more or less doubled from about 3 million, the last time we spoke about these numbers, I believe, in May, to well over 6.
Yes, of which 3.1 million are smartphones. And what we've been doing with smartphones is really driving the price and achieving better affordability. I think today the cheapest one is about $48, and that will continue to come down. We find that when you move a customer from a feature phone, which is usually a phone with a keypad, to a smartphone, the ARPU increases by nearly 200%.
Moving forward, however, with regard to data, LTE is also in the pipeline. You're rolling that out in the next 12 months. Where does Essa's assets fit into that plan?
Well, Essa's assets, which as we said today, we've got the final piece of regulatory approval from the Communication Authority, and what that gives us is 2 sets of spectrum. It gives us the 900 spectrum, which allows us to improve quality of service, particularly in urban districts, and we hope to be able to deploy that within December. So you'll see market improvement in quality of service. And the other piece is the 1800, which we will probably deploy in LTE, but the LTE story is largely around the 800 megahertz. Now, all of that's probably confusing your viewers, but the 800 megahertz is actually much more efficient for LTE or 4G deployment, which we will be doing over the next 12 months. We will cover about 15 towns and cities, and over the next 3 years, we'll have the whole country covered.
Why did you decide to go it alone? I remember about 2 years ago, the government was thinking about actually building a common network that mobile service providers could then use, or rather rent space on, and actually roll out LTE services. But at some point, you guys decided, no, this isn't working for us, let's roll out our own network.
Well, frankly, we haven't seen much development in that space. If I ask you where are you with this open access thing, I don't think it's actually progressed.
It's still on
anywhere.
paper.
It's still on paper. And we've got a real life market out there to satisfy. And so, we're pretty excited about it. So before we get to the end of this financial year, which is April, we would roll out, quite a large chunk of LTE.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. That's Bob Collymore, Safaricom's Chief Executive Officer, in studio with us right now, talking about the results for the half year ending in September. Let's take you to Rwanda. Farmers over there benefiting from a bit of new tech, biogas. It's enabling them to generate their own cooking fuel, but at the same time get manure for their crops from cow dung. As Peter Kabana reports, the system is proving to be much cheaper than conventional ones, and it can be moved around quite a bit.
Maria Goretti Twagirumukisa collects cow dung to feed a new source of energy for her home and her farm. This will be used to generate biogas, a clean renewable energy obtained through the breakdown of organic waste. It is becoming increasingly popular as a form of energy to power rural communities in Africa who live far away from the electricity grid. The new system, known as Flexi Biogas, was developed in Kenya and includes a biodigester device made of industrial plastic sheets and pipes. And unlike conventional built-in system, this one is portable.
Since I received the Flexi Biogas, I use it to cook and I have lighting. I don't have to buy firewood or oil anymore. The money I save is used to buy other things like groceries.
Twagirumukisa is enrolled in a pilot project run by the government and the International Fund for Agriculture Development that wants to reduce the cutting and burning of wood to prevent deforestation as well as soil erosion. Her 2 cows produce manure that can generate about 3 hours of cooking gas. Flexi Biogas requires only 20 kilograms of manure to produce 1,000 liters of gas, unlike conventional system that need about 60 kilograms.
It's very easy with 1 cow and this Flexi Biogas, which is easy to install, to repair and maintain. You get enough gas for cooking and the bioslurry, which is a good fertilizer for your farm.
What is left of the cow dung after gas extraction is a potent organic fertilizer or bioslurry, which Twagiru Mukisa uses for her vegetable garden and sells the leftovers to her neighbors. The system costs about $500 to install, half the price of conventional ones. Those on the program also have access to a solar panel, which can power lights in homes as well as a radio. Twagiru Mukisa now offers phone charging services to residents using her solar panel. At the end of the pilot scheme, farmers will have to enter a cost-sharing mechanism for the purchase of the biogas system. In the meantime, plans are underway for a microfinance system that allows them to borrow money and repay it in installments. Peter Okaba, CCTV.
Quick run through equity markets here for you. A day of red ink right across the board, except, however, for North Africa. In the JSE over in South Africa today, the main driver, of course, was a fall in commodity prices. You will recall that gold is well under $1,200 an ounce, and that has dragged down a lot of commodity stocks down in South Africa on the JSE. Leaders from the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Group draw strategies on fighting the illegal flight of capital. And China is seeking to stamp its authority in the innovation space. We'll have details on that and plenty more next. Africa is on the move. It's home to 7 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies. We help you make sense of the fast-changing African business landscape. We take you where the business is happening.
This report by the African Green Revolution Alliance says climate change will slash food output. Within the next 30 years, the number of malnourished people in sub-Saharan Africa could jump nearly 40%.
Welcome back to the program. You're watching Global Business Africa. Now, fighting corruption is expected to take center stage at this year's APEC meetings in Beijing, China. Members of that group are building up a network to prevent the flight of illegal funds and criminals. Our reporter Han Bin speaks to a Chinese anti-corruption expert who says APEC's new anti-corruption mechanism could have far-reaching significance for the international body.
China and Australia have joined hands in fighting corruption. Police from both sides are taking action. They have seized the assets of corrupt Chinese officials in Australia. This is part of China's international campaign, codenamed Operation Fox Hunt. The objective is to bring back all fugitive officials to face justice. Chinese experts like Professor Cheng Wen-hao from Tsinghua University believe that the China-Australian cooperation is more than just symbolic. It opens a new route for the country's global fight against corruption.
Both countries are signatory states of the UN Anti-Corruption Convention. They have obligation on law enforcement. Although they have no extradition treaty, they can still cooperate within the framework of a higher international law.
Fleeing abroad and transferring assets overseas, the decades-old game plan of corrupt officials. The top 3 destinations are Australia, the US and Canada. The reasons: easy to get residency, easy to transfer money, and no fear of prosecution, and no extradition treaty. China's new anti-corruption direction is going beyond borders. The focus has changed from consensus to pragmatic cooperation.
China has been actively seeking bilateral judicial assistance with other countries. We have signed agreements on judicial assistance, extradition, and transferring of convicted persons with around 63 countries.
China is pushing to upgrade the APEC network of anti-corruption authorities and law enforcement agencies known as ACT-NET. Sharing information and resources is key.
Many countries have found that illegal money usually went through underground economies, which created more crimes. So the attitudes in dealing with fugitives and their illegal money have been drastically changed. There's been a high consensus among APEC members to expand cross-border cooperation to bring more transparency and fairness to the global economy.
Professor Cheng says such stronger law enforcement cooperation could be a game changer not just for China and APEC, but in the global fight against corruption.
China has been making it a point to go after fugitive officials this year. The APEC's new anti-graft mechanism could help nurture good governance and sustain economic growth. This new network is expected to be endorsed as part of the leaders' declaration. Many believe its actual impact could be profound and significant. Han Bin, CCTV, Beijing.
For the better part of the last 2 decades, China's been mostly known for its manufacturing prowess, but technological innovations in that country have rarely attracted the same level of attention. The government there and other companies now are investing in research and development with the idea of boosting that particular aspect of the country. Lin Nan has more.
No diesel needed and zero emissions. This bus, which runs through downtown Shanghai, has been powered by supercapacitors since 2008. The bus uses an innovative storing and charging system for its batteries to maximize efficiency. Every time it stops to pick up passengers, it's charging.
After charging at the departure station, the bus can go 4 to 5 stops, and it can run the entire route without the air conditioner on.
Compared with traditional batteries, which can take hours to recharge, those that run on supercapacitors are much more time-saving. It only takes 30 to 90 seconds to charge the system. That means the bus can charge while waiting for the traffic lights to change. The system not only saves time, it's also cost-effective.
The service life of a bus is 8 years. The supercapacitor only needs to be replaced once and costs 600,000 yuan, while lithium batteries need to be replaced every 2 to 3 years and cost 1.8 million yuan. We can save a lot of money by operating supercapacitor buses, and we can open a new route this year.
Away Technology Development, a private tech company based in Shanghai, is a big driver of the innovation. Starting from scratch 16 years ago, it has become one of the leaders in the industry. The company has exported supercapacitor buses and has set up industrial standards in Europe and Israel. But the success hasn't come easy.
Tech companies need more policy support from the government because the market is usually affected by it. For example, we have gained contracts for supercapacitor buses, but it was cancelled later due to the subsidy policy change.
Hua says financing difficulties are also a big challenge for small and medium-sized tech companies, as they usually don't have many fixed assets. They rely solely on their technology.
China's move from imitation to innovation has been a matter of national policy in recent years. Apart from the drive of the market, Chinese companies, especially startups, need a more supportive mechanism to transfer their innovations from the lab to practical use and profit.
Many small firms focus on some specific areas of the industry chain, and they need to work with these upstream and downstream technologies together to make a product for the market. In many cases, there is a lack of such information to find the right match. The government should help to integrate these resources.
Despite being the second largest economy in the world and manufacturer of most of the world's electronics and gadgets, China still has a long way to go before it will be recognized as an innovative power station. Hoping to close the technological gap, many companies are now helping the country innovate to make sure that Made in China becomes designed in China. Lin Nan, CCTV, Shanghai.
Now, with respect to commodities, oil prices are really the main story to focus on here. Brent crude and Western Texas Intermediate crude all down to fresh 4- and 3-year lows respectively. Saudi Arabia, of course, did prompt that, especially with news that it cut prices for US clients but raised them for its clients in Asia and Europe. Keep an eye out for the OPEC meeting on the 27th of November. Coming up next, we'll focus on one Egyptian family's tradition that's winning one barber, lots of loyal donkeys, and their owners as well. Welcome back to the program. Now, life isn't easy for the donkeys and the horses of Cairo, but one specialist tradesman is working quite hard to keep them looking proper. In our grassroots segment tonight, to meet a man with a special touch for these four-legged creatures. Mohammed Mahmoud is a third-generation donkey barber, and his skill has earned him quite the reputation.
Mohammed Mahmoud gently plies his trade in the shadow of old Cairo's medieval aqueduct. His skill is unique to this region, and for Mahmoud, it's a family tradition. He's known as a donkey barber. He's an expert in trimming and styling horses, camels, sheep, and of course, donkeys. Mahmoud's grandfather started the business, and now he's training his 5-year-old son Mustafa in the tools of the trade.
My grandfather taught my father, and my father taught me. That's how we became Kassassin barbers. This is our work. My grandfather worked at a university in England. We learned from our family. We are barbers and horse cart and cart drivers. That is our work.
Mahmoud charges between $3 to $5 per customer and usually spends about 30 minutes with every client, depending on how sensitive the animal is.
Some do the job with violence and beat the animals. For example, when you're trading horses, you check their teeth, and the horse won't let you because it's scared. Many barbers say you must break the horse, but this is a lie. If you do that, you won't be able to sell them.
Mahmoud has lost teeth and a fingertip during the course of his barber duties, but he's gained many more loyal customers. Horse and cart driver Rahman Ibrahim is one of Mahmoud's regulars. He waits almost 3 hours for his horse's monthly trim and says he only lets Mahmoud do it because of his respect for the animals.
There are lots of other people who do this job, but Mahmoud, is gentle, and his prices are gentle too. Other people may use sticks and bats to discipline the animal.
His clients, many of whom are tradesmen with horses and carts, typically request regular trims to keep their animals cool in the summer. They also ask him to clip their initials into the animal's flanks using the Roman alphabet. Sometimes clients give Mahmoud full creative license to create his own patterns and designs. While he won't get rich off these donkey hides, he says the animal barber trade is part of his family's identity, and Cairo's four-legged animals certainly appreciate the attention. Voldi Karelse, CCTV.
Quick run through the currencies here for you. Two key stories of note. The rand, of course, outperforming emerging market peers, going up above about 11 or so. Rand to the US dollar, outperforming emerging market peers. Over in East Africa, the Central Bank of Kenya did retain its base lending rate at 8.5% as well. We'll see what effect that has on the Kenyan shilling later on tomorrow. That's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Thank you so much for watching. Do send your feedback to globalbusinessafrica@cctv.com. And of course, when you're offline, Facebook and Twitter are your ports of call. We'll see you over there. And in the next 23 hours, I'm Raman Yang.